Hi, and welcome to Hope for the Soul. It's nice that you've decided to come and listen to this little clip, and we hope that you will um, learn something new, maybe, or maybe even just hear again things you know and come to appreciate them a little bit more. And we just hope that you will also think about the gospel meeting in Wabashin at the Wabashin Gospel Hall, and you'll hear a similar story even this weekend, Easter weekend, and we trust that it will be a blessing and a hope for your soul. I just want to read a couple of verses from the Bible in the Gospel of Mark in chapter 16. This is Easter weekend. Tomorrow's Good Friday and Saturday and Sunday, and then Monday, of course, Easter Monday. And I just want to read a little bit of the story surrounding this weekend. Comes from the Gospel of Mark chapter 16 and verse 1. When the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go and anoint him, that is Jesus. He was in the grave. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. And they were saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb?" And looking up, they saw that the stone had been rolled back. It was very large. And entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, dressed in a white robe. And they were alarmed, and he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where you laid him." One of the things I remember most about this story, way back, probably 2012, we went as a family to a place called the Holy Land Experience in Florida, just a little bit north of Orlando. And one of the things they were putting on, one of the shows they were putting on, was the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus. And we watched as they did their performance, and it was very, very real. And our daughters were very young, and our oldest daughter, Alexandra, she was sitting in the stroller, and she didn't much like the part of the story where Jesus was crucified. They made it sound and they made it feel very real. And they brought life to a story that happened 2,000 years ago. But one of the things I remember most about that little experience there in Florida was as they had done the crucifixion and they had put Jesus in the tomb and they had rolled this big stone in front of the door of that tomb. They did a song. And as they were doing the song and they were talking about the days that had passed, the women came to the tomb. And of course, as we read, they said, "Who's going to roll away the stone?" It was a large stone. And there was a big challenge that day because there was a large stone. There was the Roman seal on the stone that said, if you break this seal, then you'll be found guilty of death. And there were going to be Roman soldiers at that tomb as well, because there were some that were afraid that the disciples would come and steal the body of Jesus and then say he had risen. And so the women were wondering, who is going to roll away this big stone for us? Well, during the play down there at the Holy Land Experience in Florida, as they came to the tomb, the stone began to roll away. And of course, there was smoke and great theatrics. But one of the things I remember the most is up on the top of the tomb, the person who had been playing Jesus was standing in a white robe. And my daughter started to yell, "He's alive! He's alive! He's alive! He's alive!" That's the hope for the soul. Jesus is alive. And this weekend there will be those remembering his death, his burial, and most importantly, his resurrection. Paul could write to the the believers there, and he could say, if Christ isn't raised, then our hope is empty. And we are miserable people because we're not hoping in anything, because the person we're hoping in, he's still in the tomb. He's still dead. But that's not Jesus. That angel came to the ladies that day. And he said, you're seeking Jesus of Nazareth. Well, he's not here. He's risen. He's alive. There were many, many that doubted. They weren't sure. Even Mary Magdalene, we read that, all the women went back, but not Mary Magdalene. She stayed around the tomb, and she came to hear the voice of a man behind her and say, who are you looking for? And she thought he was the gardener of that cemetery. And she said, if you've taken away my Lord, tell me where you've put him, so that I can take him away, so that I can do the right thing. I can bury him properly. And that man just said her name. He said, Mary. She knew the voice now. She knew the one who spoke her name. And she turned and she said, Master. She knew it was Jesus. The doubt all fled away. The hope that had been crushed at the cross was now revived. Jesus was alive. She went and she told the disciples, and they didn't believe her either. And they ran to the tomb and they looked, and the tomb was empty. And those bandages, those cloths that had wrapped him in the tomb, they were sitting there all neatly folded, because he wasn't there. He was risen. And that is the greatest hope of the soul today. Behind me is some stone, and the stone couldn't hold Jesus. And the stone didn't roll away so that Jesus could get out of the tomb. It rolled away so those outside could look in and see that he was risen. And that is our hope for the soul even today, 2,000 years later. Those men and women, they were persecuted heavily after that event. Persecuted so much they should have given up their eyewitness account. But they wouldn't. They knew it was true. They knew that he was risen. And he even showed himself to them in an upper room. He showed them his hands. He showed them his feet. He showed them his side. They saw those marks of Calvary. And they knew this. He is risen. Many times Paul would be called before kings and judges and officials of different governments. And this was the message. He's alive. Christ lives. And that is our hope for the soul, today and forever. He said to Martha that day that he came to her brother Lazarus's funeral, he said, Martha, do you believe that I'm the resurrection and the life? And she says, I know my brother will live again. And he said, no, Martha, do you believe it? And he went and he raised Lazarus from the dead. Today we can believe the words of Jesus, not because of anything else but this. He said he was resurrection and life, and he rose from the dead. What he says, he can and he will do. So many times in life we make promises, and sometimes we can't keep them. Sometimes it's not our fault, and sometimes it is. Even this video, I'm submitting it a little bit late, I have to confess. It should have been in earlier. I made a promise, and I should have kept it earlier, but, not with Jesus. He made a promise, and he's going to keep his promise. He said, I am the resurrection and the life. And if we trust in him, he will give us hope of an end that is sure, life and life eternal. Not because I say it, but because he said it. And it is sure as his words, I am the resurrection and the life. This is our hope. He said it, and he'll do it. He can't fail. We fail, but not him. And so for this little time together, again, thank you for for tuning in and listening to this, and we hope it's a blessing to you. But here is the great truth. When the women came and said, "Who will roll away the stone?" it was already done. You know, you can come to Jesus and wonder, what do I have to do to get to God? What do I have to do to get to heaven? It's already done. Jesus said on the cross, "It is finished." Listen to the words of the angel again. You seek Jesus of Nazareth. He's not here. He's risen. I hope you would have that amazement and that joy that my young daughter had that day, 2012, when she watched that spectacle, that show, and saw the man who had been crucified now standing on top of that hill. And that exclamation of her heart was this: He's alive. He's alive. And so I point you to him, not to me, I point you to him, Jesus, the one who died and was buried. And yet today, 2023, we'll remember it this weekend. He's alive. He's risen. And so we trust that this will be a blessing to you. And we trust that it will have an impact on your heart as you listen to this little story. Thank you.